And you?
And I'm glad to be in Seattle.
I have heard in the last day 7 interviews with you, covering almost everything. Is there anything that you haven't been asked that you would like to have been asked? Anything you want to say?
Yeah,
It's very hard to hear all those interviews,
well, yeah, I don't know. It's funny, not many people ask me much about the television show, and yet they all saw it.
Were you happy with it?
Yes, I was very happy with the show. The only problem with doing a TV show is that I find personally that that a television show always has a time deadline. In other words, you have a certain deadline when it's supposed to go on the air, and you have to make compromises due to the fact of the time. That's one of the beautiful things about the movie world. A guy can work 2 years editing his movie, and nobody comes and says, you got to have it done next Wednesday. But in television, you have to, it's simply because you're really doing, in effect, the same thing they do in the movies. At least we did in our show, because we had a lot of visual, we had a lot of action stuff, a lot of cuts, a lot of editing. And we would produce well, it was a half-hour show. The average movie is only 3 times that length. The average movie is only 90 minutes. And sometimes they'll work on a movie, a 90-minute movie, a year, 2 years. Well, we had to produce 13 weeks of shows, 13 half hours, which, when you think about it, is the equivalent of around 4 movies. We had to produce that in less than, well, something like 5 months, including going to the places and shooting it and bringing it back.
How come, if you had come to me or if I had gone to you and said, let's do a television series, how come you went for that concept of Gene Shepard's America as opposed to, and this is just an example, an animated series or a drama series, which was Schwartz, Flick, Kissel, and the Boys in Hammond?
Well, because...
Have you ever considered doing it?
No, that would be terrible. For one thing, Greg, I guess as an artist, that what bothers me more than anything else about people who like my work is they keep wanting me to repeat my work. They don't want me to do anything different. They would have me go and take Schwartz and Flick and Brunner and now put them on television, which is really just putting them into another medium. And I find, well, this is very limiting to you. It's like saying to Picasso, now you did that three-eyed woman, let's do it as an animation. After that, we'll turn out T-shirts. And how about let's turning out a building that's shaped like that, and then we'll paint the island of Corfu like a three-eyed woman, and ultimately he would flip his bird, because people want you to do that, and I also feel that the idea of knowing something really about America is very important at this time. Now, I think this is a far more important thing than knowing about race, which we constantly yammer about on TV, or about drugs, which we've been yammering about for 2 years. Very few people in different parts, like here in Seattle, very few people know anything about how life is in Maine. If they do, it's very superficial and sketchy. You go to a New York City, I live in New York, Greg, and it's hard to believe, but Maine is just 400 miles north of New York City. Now, 400 miles is, what, a 6, 7 hour, 8 hour drive, something like that?
From here to Spokane.
That's right. Do you know that almost every New Yorker I've ever met has never been to Maine? He has no concept of what it's like in Maine. And yet, out of places like New York and out of places like the underground press, which are usually published in places like urban student centers, are coming great pronouncements about America. They keep referring to the redneck belt, or they keep referring to the South, as if they really know about these places. And I thought that a little knowledge of what America's like without preaching, no preaching. In other words, what is it like to really be in a steel mill instead of always talking about hard hats? Incidentally, that was ironical that my crew, which was from Boston, and all of them very cocksure about their attitudes of what they'd find any place else. You go to Indiana and the steel mills, you're going to find hard hats. They believe this. Well, our guide in the steel mill, just by coincidence, was taking us around the mill. In the middle of the second day, one of the guys asked him, got talking to him. It turns out he's a famous, in his off time, he's a famous and a published ornithologist. which completely threw these guys.
Hard hat, yeah.
Yeah, hard hat. And by the way, he was wearing a hard hat, see.
Yeah.
So,
you have
so,
to, because they're always dropping stuff on you.
so when you ask me why I didn't do those things, I thought that television, you see, as a medium, lends itself particularly well to what could be called immediate personal visual journalism. In other words, how does it look to drive on a road in, say, Wyoming in a snowstorm? Just to actually be inside the Fiat and drive through this. A lot of people have never had an experience like that. How does it feel to drive in a rainstorm through the forest on the coast of Maine? All of these things we put on the show, and people, I suppose, were a little irritated about that because they wanted to see Schwartz and Flick and Bruner. Which meant...
No, I didn't. I wanted to hear about them.
Well,
I wanted to see them.
You wanted to hear about them, and then you should stay listening to KRAB. Don't bother with my television show. I keep telling my people who like my work, you must understand I work in different mediums.
Yeah.
And you want me to do the same thing in all those mediums.
Well, when I hear you talk about them, then I can see them myself.
That's fine, and that's
why
what
I
it should
listen
be.
to the radio, right?
You know that there's never been a successful dramatization of a novel, really. Because the novel is a medium that's separate unto itself. Catch-22 was a deadly bore. The movie? Yes.
The novel wasn't.
The novel was, but the movie was a deadly bore because as soon as you put the novel...
No, Greg's
Do you think you would have been as bored by the movie if you hadn't read the novel first?
Well, yes, I would have, because it was so deadly in its preaching.
Yeah, I'll go with
to me, preachers are always bores, and I hate to be preached to. You know, anybody that comes and looks out at me and preaches to me about an obvious thing, that war is bad, is ridiculous.
I can think of one example offhand, which I thought was an excellent movie made from an excellent book, and that was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Well, I didn't see it and I didn't read it, so I don't know.
Well, then I'm right.
I don't know. I don't know. But you see, it depends on the kind of character.
It's another thing about the decadent South, by the way.
Of course, the South is always decadent in all writing, and so that was probably why you thought it was excellent. But
with his twist on that, yeah.
That's probably true. May I make a point here as a writer that if you're writing, in a sense, a repertorial novel, that's what To Kill a Mockingbird seemed to me to be, that you're writing about real people who have real lives and even based on real people. You put those on the screen, and you're not going to resent a real person walking around being that person, because he is a real person. But if you take a caricature, if you write in terms of a caricature, and this is what, say, Heller does, there's nobody in the Army like any of those people that he had in Catch-22. I tell you, having been in the Army, well, I must say I was in the Army 3 years, so I have a little right to say that. I paid my dues. That these are all imaginary characters. But the minute you have a guy who has a name like Major, 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 and you put him in the form of a real man, it's just ludicrous, because you wouldn't accept that in real life. Nobody would be like this. So the novel tends to be alternately, the movie, alternately silly and boring. You can't put a real little Abner on the stage. That didn't work, really.
Right.
Well,
Blood Kissel would not transfer well to some fat character crawling down the street.
And Archie the Hannibal was wonderful to read, and it's terrible. We've got a record of it.
Of course, it's a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And my characters are caricatures. My characters are really composites. That there's no real Schwartz, there's no real Flick, no real Bruner. Because if I went out and got a Schwartz to play a Schwartz, you'd immediately say, oh, what a rotten movie. They didn't, because you've got your own Schwartz in your mind.
That ain't Schwartz.
That ain't Schwartz, of course not. And then you would say the movie makers really lost it up. They really screwed up that great novel. And I just simply say, no, my characters are written and performed characters. They're always off stage, literally. Because the real character in it that runs through it is the I. This is the I. In other words, the omniscient I, the first person. And you'll accept him, you see. In the case when I'm performing it, it's me. But if I suddenly wore my Schwartz costume, you wouldn't like it. If I put on my Flick suit. And so for that reason, when I went into to do television to start out, you asked me why I chose to do America, because I think at this point, The one thing that bothers me about this country is growing almost, I don't think since the Civil War, and all I know about the Civil War is what I read, of course, but it seems to me that sectionalism is the big problem today. In the East, they're constantly talking about a mythical place called Middle America. Here, I keep hearing a term used here in Seattle called rednecks. Well, I don't know what a redneck is. Incidentally, the redneck refers to a specific type of person living in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Somehow, here it's become now in Seattle that anybody who's somehow not either from New York or Seattle is a redneck.
Not really. Not really.
Well, no, this is the kind of thing that's
One
growing.
of the greatest sectionalisms, though, is New York and every place else.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah, but you've got it here. Every place I go, people tell me how rotten the place is I live in.
Okay, if you were setting out,
two ways, you know,
like me, been born and raised in Seattle, and you were setting out to see America, you'd taken a year and you were going to see America, would you go to New York first or last, or at all?
Yes, indeed I would. If I didn't go to New York, that would be like visiting France and never going near Paris. You may not do it, you may put it down. If you do, that's so much loss for you. Because New York is a specific world phenomenon. New York is there's only about, well, I'll name them. There's only a few world-class cities. By world-class cities, these are cities that are in a class that could really conceivably be almost called countries of their own. They don't have much relationship to the country they're in. Mm-hmm. New York, Paris, Rome, London,
Tokyo?
No.
Not Tokyo.
Not Tokyo at all. Its size has not much to do with it. I'm talking about the cosmopolitan air about it, where large numbers of people have come from all over the world for whatever reason to live in that city. You go to Rome, you'll find everybody from Estonians to Americans living in it.
What about Berlin?
Berlin died as an international city at the beginning of World War II and has never made it back because of the divisions in that. But Berlin was. In the 20s, apparently, from what I've read, Berlin was a world city. But we're vaguely ashamed of it here in America, or bugged by it or irritated, because it simply does not act like Indianapolis. It simply does not act like San Francisco or Seattle. And a world-class city does it. Has its own morality. That if you go to London, I was in Plymouth and Exeter, in the far end of the island of England, and they look at London exactly the same way as Seattle people look at New York.
The world-class city is always resented.
Always. I have never. In Italy, they all hate Romans. Romans.
You mean urban areas are resented by rural people?
No, not at all. Yeah, you're missing my point. Urban area, then that would mean that the guy living outside of Seattle would hate Seattle. And I'm
frequently
saying
they do.
Frequently he does, but he talks about it in terms of the traffic and that. We're not talking about urban versus
You were talking
rural.
about a morality.
You don't think that this city here is rural, do you? Seattle hating New York is urban rural? No. Why does Chicago hate New York? Why does Minnesota, Duluth hate New York? Are these rural areas?
No, I don't know why.
Well, is what I'm trying to say. That these cities, you go to a city like Seattle, and the people in Seattle are largely homogenous. I know there's a very small number of blacks in the city, for one thing. I saw no Puerto Ricans all walking around here.
Very few Puerto Ricans.
That's right. I saw very few, by New York standards, Jews or Italians.
That's right. Well,
okay. So what I'm saying here is that a city like New York, a world city, they have a tremendous polyglot population, a polyglot, which is not at all typical of the country they live in. So you go to Exeter, for example, or Plymouth in England, and all the people are Englishmen. You go to London and you see thousands of Indians with turbans. You see millions of Chinese. You see Jamaicans. You don't see those people in Plymouth or Exeter. So they bring all kinds of different moralities into this city, and they make it into it's like a separate creation that has nothing to do with the country that it's in. It's just merely geographical accident that happens to be on this island. So the people come from, say, Seattle to New York, and all of a sudden, here they are in a cab with a Lithuanian cab driver who doesn't speak English much. And so then they begin to get very nervous. and
Where's he taking me?
Well, not only that, you see, he recognizes you as an out-of-towner, and as an out-of-towner, it's quite obvious that you're you're an out-of-towner, and you're not one of us. There's a certain enclave quality about New York, and so the cross section. A guy walked down through Times Square, for example, in New York, and he's from out of town, and it's like he might as well be walking through Oz. He's never seen that. You have this fantastic cross-section of everything, and he'll see thousands of faces that look vaguely alien and foreign to him. And they are.
Why do you think tourists are rejected almost everywhere except by people who have specific money to make off? You always read things about, oh God, here comes another guy with a flowered shirt and a camera.
Well, it's because he's different. I think also that's true. Tourists, I think we have all part of our life, all inside of us. We have it's maybe related to the ego. We like to believe that we represent the norm, stability. And it's just like all the hippies believe their morality is the best morality. A guy who's in the Episcopal Church, he believes there's two of his. And so when a man shows up to come to your city, and he's got the trappings of a tourist, you know darn well he's not part of your crowd. And furthermore, he's come to look at you, almost look at you like you'd look at something in a zoo. And there's just a natural thing. And I think people also, we like to think we're on top of it. We hate to think of ourselves as a tourist. It really bothers me to think I'm a tourist here in Seattle.
I'd like to ask you some Gene Shepherd Apocrypha.
What the hell is that?
Well,
that sounds like something medical.
Yeah, it is. It's a disease. I've been listening to you for 15 years, and over the years there have been some stories that have
Well, now, I started...
my attention.
When did you listen to me 15 years ago?
I used to drive to my psychiatrist on Saturday morning and listen to you as I was driving in Philadelphia. You were on from 10 to noon. You purged my head. I got to my psychiatrist's office at 11. I had an hour in the car with you.
Well,
so you talked to me, and then I talked to him.
The show, that morning show that I was on was in '61. Yes,
no,
he's going to correct me now.
It was in 1956.
No,
it was coming out of New York.
No,
Yeah.
not so. You're wrong. Hate to tell you, Mr. Merkin. Lorenzo, you asked me.
Yeah, I listened to...
Of course you did, Lorenzo. And Lorenzo, as a student of the medium, I'm going to give you some real bad news today. That there's a guy up at Columbia right now, a major psychologist, who's writing a paper. He contacted me about 3 months ago. I'm supposed to do some writing on it for him. The effect of radio on people's time sense. Everybody who meets me claims he listened to me, quote, when he was a kid. And some of them come doddering up and they're 78. Now, I suspect what happens is that a guy listens to my work, and it's very personal. He's in a car. You notice he said that? It's not a thing that you do as an audience. You're personal. You're involved in something. You're shaving, or you're getting ready to go to bed, or you're driving your car, and here comes this voice out. You listen to me, and I'm talking about my work particularly. I can't talk for others. And it causes a curious inner reverie sometimes. I will talk about, say, something that happened to me when I was 10. You get drawn into the story. And by God, within 3 months, you believe that you were listening to me when you were 10. You begin to confuse your own childhood with me. Now, I came to New York in '58. I'm sorry.
Anyway, that's not that.
Well, no, isn't that an interesting...
It's weird.
But isn't that
What's wrong
interesting?
with it? I'm going to speak to my psychiatrist.
That's 14 years. He
Huh?
was close. That's 14.
Yeah, but he said that
And you did a morning program. Do you remember when you first came to New York? Didn't you do a morning program?
It was on from 11 a.m. until 1.
That's right.
Once a week on Saturday. That's correct.
That
Yeah.
was it. Anyway,
Good show, by the way.
It was interesting. I had been told that starting not long after that, you saw to it that all of your programs were taped.
Correct.
That you live in a giant archive of Gene Shepard tapes, a warehouse with room upon room of them.
Did you hear about
And
the
when
one?
you're
Did you hear about the one when I was a boxer?
no,
Did you hear about the one when I was in Lexington taking the cure for heroin? Did you hear about that one? Did you hear about the one when I flew the biplane out of France? I'm glad you called it Apocrypha because that's what it is. No, I do not own a Gene Shepard tape. Gene Shepard does not live in the past like his listeners do. Gene Shepard couldn't care less about Gene Shepard tapes. Gene Shepard has an office at 1440 Broadway, and he keeps some tapes there, which he uses for repeats when he wants to go out of the country. But Shepard does not, and I do not collect clippings. Here's my producer. She'll tell you. Tell him about it.
No, really, it's sort of true. Really.
What do you mean, sort of true? There you go. All right. What kind of crap is this?
Maybe 100 tapes.
No, but he says I live among Gene Shepard tapes, and I sit and listen to him.
Well, Lorenzo, you're 2 out of
You're
2.
only-
warehouse in Brooklyn.
No,
Oh.
no, he never listened to us.
Lorenzo,
I
you're
had
confusing
dark
me with
warehouse.
Samuel Beckett.
No.
There's a thing called Krapp's Last Tape, and Shepard doesn't sit and play tapes of his life.
No, it was that I wasn't even hinting that you would even listen to them because you got yourself. But I was saying that you were setting up. This is what it was. Is that you were setting up a repository for future historians. So that
Do I sound like Norman Mailer? Do you think I've got that kind of pomposity, really? Does that sound
not
like
even
me?
like Norman Vincent Peale.
Does that sound like me? You know, that Shepard, he sees that in the future he's going to be known as the great spokesman of all time, and he's keeping these. That would be a nice thought. May be true even. But I'll tell you what is happening, though. Now, maybe there is a grain of truth in that. I have discovered within the last year or so, and it's a very interesting kind of thing that I think that a lot you can say about it. But there are a lot of people, particularly kids, who have collected thousands of hours of tapes of my stuff that they personally have taped. Now, this I can definitely say is true. And then some kids have got them cross-indexed into subject matter. One kid down in Texas has a catalog where he rents Army stories to other kids. He's got Schwartz stories, Flick stories, Fuller stories.
Probably going to drive a Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, the little skunk, he's probably making a fortune on it. And you know how I found out about it, Lorenzo? It was a wild story. I got a letter from a kid in London, England. The kid writes me this long letter about this particular story, and I wonder, well, how the hell did he hear this story? You know, I'm not broadcast over there. I wrote to him, and I said, what do you know about this thing? And he wrote back, he said, he's been a Shepard fan for a long time. He subscribes to this service this kid in Texas has got. You know, and so there's an underground ripoff going on all over the world. There's a little Stanley Kubrick of pirated Shepard records somewhere. You know, sitting there cackling, counting his dough. But he rents them.
I use your phone so I can call Jerry in New York and tell him, quit degousing those tapes.
But that's a great story. I ought to let these legends go on, you know.
Sure.
It'd be terrible to find out that F. Scott Fitzgerald never went to Paris. He never knew anybody called Zelda. This was all created by his readers.
Did you? I remember. You know, I always thought of you as you, me, and the microphone. I'm on the other end listening to you, and I was. I guess I was a little disappointed when I found out that you went out and spoke to audiences, because I saw you as a creature of the studio, the radio studio.
Yeah, that's
when
almost...
the first time that you went out to speak to an audience. I mean, didn't that sort of that's a whole different set. That's a whole different.
Well, Lorenzo, may I say that do see, this is a difficult thing to answer here because I don't think of myself the way my listeners do. In other words, I'm a performer, and I work in every medium that I find that I enjoy working in. Now, Greg and I have had long talks about this, Greg Palmer and I, over the last couple of days, because the worst enemy that any performer has is his best fan. Because that fan wants him to stay exactly the way he is. He doesn't want him to change. And yet, ironically enough, that same listener is the guy that will ultimately attack you for never changing. He'll say, you know, he hasn't done anything different since, and yet he wants you to. So it's you have to, as a performer, and I think of myself as a performer, writer. I work in every medium that I like to work in. I have to ignore my fans entirely.
Particularly, Gene, because you're working with nostalgia.
No, I'm not. They are. They are.
You are.
Oh, no.
You give it out.
No. What is nostalgia? May I ask you, Helen, what nostalgia? What is nostalgia, Helen? What is nostalgia? Oh, wait, let's see what this says. No.
Yeah.
Well, then so is
You're
Joseph
something
Heller. Wait a
better.
minute, honey. Joseph Heller deals with nostalgia. He wrote a novel about World War II. That's a quarter of a century ago.
Yes, but that's what I mean. When you talk about your Army days, then I can think
Well, what
back.
army do you think I was in?
I hope you were in the United States Army.
No, I'm trying to say, when you talk about the Army, there's an Army now.
The War of 1812.
I'm trying to say that being in the Army is a universal experience. I don't say, at no point do I say, when I was in the Army in 1915, there's a difference between individual autobiography and talking about universal experience. Now, because you hear my voice, you assume everybody who listens to me firmly believes I'm their age, including 15-year-olders. Now, that'll surprise you. See, because nostalgia is dealing with a phenomenon which I do not hold to, and that is this: people tend, one of the great sicknesses of our times is the absolutely universal belief that there was a specific thing called the good old days. There really was a good old days, and I say, oh, that's one of the great delusions of all time. Anybody that calls World War II good old days is sick. That might have been Hitler, maybe. He would have said those were the great days. He was really making it. But anybody who thinks those were the good old days, millions of guys were killed in those days. Millions of people were dying all over the world. Good old days. Anybody who calls the 30s the good old days obviously knows nothing about them.
You don't think that's what nostalgia is?
I think it's a sickness, and I don't subscribe to it. And I say many people do have that myth going. And I do not deal with it. In fact, everything in my stories, if you listen carefully, that the kid in the story gets every bit as much trouble as Portnoy does in Portnoy's Complaint. That he goes to get a BB gun for Christmas, and it turns out to shoot him in the eye. Is this nostalgia? No. Nostalgia would say, oh, they were so beautiful. He got this BB gun, and it was so lovely. He had a great time. He wouldn't shoot himself in the eye with it. Nostalgia is pretending that bad things didn't happen then.
Right.
Well, listen to me then, carefully.
I don't know. They don't sound bad.
Well, that's because I laugh at them.
Yeah. Because
See, Shepard laughs at tragedy. If
You're
Shepard
older.
came on and said over and over again, oh, God, oh, what a terrible time I had when I was a kid. I'll never forget my drunken uncle who'd come home and he'd beat my aunt. That's my Uncle Carl that I laugh at, by the way. He did do that. There's two ways of looking at tragedy. One is to laugh at it, and the other is to cry over it. And I say that the most futile thing to do in this world is cry. And so, because I laugh, listen carefully. Ludlow Kissel, was a sad, out-of-work drunk, right? He was a drunk. His kid lived with a drunk, Junior Kissel, in my book. His mother sat on the porch all day long, and because she was married to a drunk, she had no life. She weighed 300 pounds and read true stories. Now, I could write that, and it would be a terrible tragedy. Really. I talk about the fact that these people lived in the middle of a steel mill with nothing but great drifting clouds of smoke around them. Mm-hmm. And the only time they ever had off was 2 weeks when they could go to a muddy lake in Michigan. Well, now, if you call that nostalgia, I'll say then a story of contemporary Newark could be called nostalgia. See, I think most middle-class, upper affluent people who have escaped all those things tend to believe those things are in the past.
That's true.
And people, kids in Newark are reading me today, which is a terrible slum, and that's where most of my readers are. They don't see it in the past at all. Their father has been out of work. They are living next to a drunk. Their uncle is a drunk who one day left. And they like the fact I'm the only person around who laughs at these things instead of cries at them. Nostalgia, no. They would have gone to this beautiful crystal clear lake.
With no snakes.
Oh no, not at all. Their uncle would have been a colorful, wonderful person who in the end didn't turn out to be a drunk at all, and they came and brought them this great... Yeah, taught them how to whittle a whistle. In other words, the Robert Paul Smith syndrome. Where did you go out? That's the candy cane kids thing. And my work is anti-nostalgia. As a matter of fact, the only critic who's pointed that out recently is a guy who strangely enough, wrote a criticism of my work in the Tuscaloosa, Alabama Times. Beautiful critic. I'm really surprised. He says, the one thing, he says, this is the first book I've ever read that's anti-nostalgia. And then he said, Shepard writes about childhood in a rough industrial city the way it is at this minute.
Oh, see, I don't listen to you. I haven't read your book, but I don't listen to you as saying something that happens now.
That's right. Because
you something that happened before that I would be able to cope with.
Well, then that's well. Then why do kids listen to
We went to Mercer Island High School yesterday.
See, that's why kids listen.
And talked to a humor satire class, Bob Glynn's class. And they realized that perhaps the older generation looks at it as nostalgia. I hate the phrase older generation, but it will suffice here. You and I. But for them, they're worried right now about getting a Wanda Hickey in the spring.
Yeah, these kids immediately related to all my stories. In fact, not as nostalgia. I just had a story in Playboy here last August, just a couple of months ago, called The Mole People Battle of Forces of Darkness. It was about a boys' camp. Well, I must have gotten 1,000 letters from kids in camp at the moment reading it.
That's it.
Well, they says, you must have come to this. What did you do? Write it about this camp, for God's sakes. I didn't see you here. See, what confuses you is that I use an I, and you think that's me, Gene Shepard, talking. The I is as literary as, say, the I which is in Moby Dick.
How did you go for the first-person narration?
Well, because that's the most effective way, I find, to tell a story. Now, you can relate a story, which is different. But to tell a story, people have to focus on an I. For example, if you go back and look at Huck Finn, it's written I. Tom Sawyer is written that way. Much of the great literature is written in the first person. For one reason or another, if you recall Moby Dick, it's written I. If you're curious, even such things as The Great Gatsby is written in the first person. There is an I. Nick Carraway comes and he's telling you about. Now you could have just taken that name out and said, "Well, it's Fitzgerald telling me about this guy," but was it? See, the I in there. What I should do before every story, I should have a sentence at the beginning of it. Instead of saying I went to this place, I should say, "Call me Ishmael. I went to this place." Then you would say,
in all those examples, the I is identified as being something. In Huck Finn, the I is Huck Finn. You realize Huck is.
Well, I did it in God We Trust. As a matter of fact, if you recall, did you read In God We Trust? Well, see, nobody seems to have read me, so they don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But I wrote.
We don't read Playboy.
Well, this was published by Doubleday, and of course they're secretly owning Playboy, I suppose. But this was a novel which came out in *67 called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash. It was a bestseller. And it began with an opening of this guy riding into this town. And he said, "My name is Ralph Wesley Parker." and I'm going on an assignment for Fortune magazine to report on the effect of advancing automation on the lives of people who live in a steel industry town. The one thing that nobody at Fortune knows about, though, that I've kept secret from everybody, is the fact that I came out of a steel town. He's now an elegant writer for Fortune, lives in New York. They think he's a connoisseur of fine wines, but really, he's come out of a town like this. Well, a lot of my readers who know my radio work were furious because they wanted it to be Gene Shepard doing these things. And they kept saying, why did you put that phony name in there? Well, people who were not I should say my listeners felt that. People who know my radio work. But when I was reviewed by people who had never heard my radio show, they reviewed it purely as a novel. And they did not have that problem.
Probably can't disassociate you.
No, that's right. See, the I, when you hear me talk I on the air, I'm one of the few people who uses the radio in a literary way, not a repertorial way. That I is an apocryphal I on the air.
Speaking of apocrypha, another
it's a literary I.
story that I've heard
How do you like that?
a lot.
That boggles your mind, doesn't it? I know it. You don't. My listeners never do.
Another story that I've heard is that during the first 30 or 40 years that you were on the air, that you would do a program. You were hired to do a certain type of a program, and then you would talk too much, and the owner of the station would get outraged at you and fire you, and there would be a deluge of letters from your listeners reinstating you. How many times did this actually happen?
12.
12 times?
Yeah. I worked at 12 radio stations for one reason or another, but it was all in a comparatively short time. And you see, the kind of thing that I do and the kind of thing that I was doing at the time, and to a point I'm still doing, is basically part of, I guess, my listeners. Most of my listeners, I'm afraid, that there's two groups of listeners, divided into two neat groups in my experience. One group see me as a satirist and a humorist, comic. These generally tend to be younger listeners. They see the humor in what I'm doing. The older person tends to he thinks what I'm doing is, quote, talking about the old days. He does not see the humor in what I do. And he thinks when I'm being funny that I'm filling in time till I'm going to tell another story about the old days. He doesn't see when I'm doing things about ad agencies and I'm doing all kinds of stuff which I do on the air, as you hear, Greg. He thinks that's all filling in time. Either that or he doesn't listen to that. He gets up and goes to the John. He's waiting for me to say one time when I was a kid. Then he comes running back and sits down, and that's the real show. Now, there's two distinct groups, and I noticed that the people who know it would be difficult for you probably, Lorenzo, to realize that people like Paul Krasner and people like Lenny Bruce too. Lenny Bruce listened to my show. Stokely Carmichael listens to my show. They see it as searing social satire. They see me as putting down that myth of the good old days. Now, that's hardly nostalgia.
I can see that.
Well, you have to have a certain turn of mind. See, I guess we're used to people being more obvious about it, who come on and literally announce, Shepard, searing satirist, will now blast the myth of the...
Do you believe, as Kaufman said, that satire is what closes on Saturday night?
No, that was because Kaufman was a bad satirist. Let's put it this way, bad satire closes on Saturday night. Good satire goes on forever. What do you think Candide is? That's classical satire. I don't think Kaufman stuff will last that long.
I'm sorry. I really do want to go back to your relationships with the stations that you worked for. You have been canned 12 times.
No, not canned. I out of that 10 times I quit.
Mm-hmm. Were you actually ever taken off the air in mid-program?
No. I was. Yes, I was cut off once, but that was... See, I was never censored. contrary to what underground press believes, there's not a they that keeps telling you what not to say and what to say. I was never at any point told not to say this, or was I told to say this. Where I ran into trouble was that I would be given a show where they would say, we want X numbers of hours of music, and I would just simply talk too much. It was not a matter of what that was a rotten thing you said last night, you're canned.
They originally tried to put you in a disc jockey sort of
Well, not
That's
really.
what you started out as, right?
No,
DJ.
no, never. Never was a disc jockey. There's a lot of myths about me. I started out as an actor. I did not start out in radio. My first name was made, because I guess most of the Eastern kids heard me first on the radio, but my first name of any consequence was made on television, Lorenzo, in Cincinnati, when I had a 2-hour, or rather, for 2 years, I did a 5 nights a week, one-man television show late at night called Rear Bumper that has been compared by many people to what Kovacs did. Kovacs was contemporary at that time. He was in the East, but because I was in Cincinnati, you wouldn't have heard of this. You were probably in the East at the time, Lorenzo.
No, Cincinnati, what station was it?
WLW.
And what year was it?
1954.
That's when you first began, really.
Well, that's when I first, yes, I was in school before that. I first made my name what you could call a name in 54 and 55. I was brought east not to do radio. I did not come east to do radio. I was brought east really to replace Steve Allen on The Tonight Show.
Wow. That didn't happen, though.
Well, it didn't happen. I was recommended by Allen to NBC to replace him on that show. In fact, if you have access to a book called The Funny Men, which Allen did, it's an interesting book, by the way, about humor, you'll find in the back pages of that, the last chapter, he's talking about new forms of humor that were coming up, including Lenny Bruce, myself. He's got a lot of stuff in there about that. And I think he even mentions the fact that I had been slated to replace him on that show, or at least he makes reference to it. The reason that I didn't, there were a lot of reasons, ultimately, but the most important ones, I had made a classic mistake. When I came to the East, it was some time before Allen's contract was up. And I had left Cincinnati. I had a choice of either re-signing a contract and staying for 2 more years. I had 2-year contracts there for TV in Cincinnati, or coming east. It was I made the decision. And when I came east, I was walking down the street one day. This is the way your life goes. I walked down the street, and I was to go on the Allen Show that October. This was about roughly in May or June, something like that. And I'm walking down the street, and I met a guy who had been an executive at WLW, television and radio in Cincinnati, and he was the vice president. I just met him on the street, and he said, "What are you doing out here?" And I said, "I'm going to go on here in New York." And he says, "I have just gotten a job with RKO General," which owns WOR, and it owns several stations across the country. And he says, "I have no idea how you could translate that curious humor you do on television to radio." He says, "But I can get you a job on the local RKO radio station until," he says, "it'll just pay your cakes until you get on television." Well, I started on radio, and overnight I was a big success on radio. Everybody was listening, and you remember that night people, day people stuff, and it was the biggest thing since bottled beer, and ever since that time, they've been saying, "Well, what would he do on television? He's strictly radio." And so ever since that time, people keep telling me, "Well, you know, don't you feel strange?" I feel strange doing radio. See, I was an actor originally in Chicago. I played around with the Compass Theater and that. And when I first came to New York, you'll notice in my credits there, I was in New Faces. I did Voice of the Turtle. I did. In fact, the most recent thing I did was down at the Theater de Lys in New York, in the Village. And my co-star in that show was George Segal, Estelle Parsons. It was a play called Asylum by Arthur Kopit. And that's how recent that is, you can see, obviously. So when people think of me as radio, I say, well, that's because you've only heard me on the radio. I haven't seen it. Most of my income, Lorenzo, really, to be honest with you, in the last 3 or 4 years has come from live on-stage performances before colleges. I don't speak to them. I don't give speeches. I do comedy and so forth on college campuses all up and down through the East. In fact, this November, the big show I've got coming up is in the 6th of November in Princeton.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're running out of steam?
No.
Do you ever get that
I get
nervous feeling
that
you're sitting there and it's about 2 minutes before you're about to go on the air, and
Never.
or maybe it's 2 minutes after you've been on the air and you think, oh God, that's
Never.
terrible. I'm never going to do that.
Never.
again.
Have
I'm
I,
gonna
Leigh?
retire.
Never.
I'm getting out of here.
Never.
I'm going to do something else.
Well, my God, I've only been on the air since '58. You think that's like there's a myth that I've been on the air 100 years, and that's what that guy at Columbia
Sure,
is
we heard you
doing.
in 44.
That's what that guy, of course.
Remember back in 38?
No, that was 22. The guy in Columbia is writing about that. Why is it? You know that it's always a shock to people to find that I haven't been on the air any longer than Hugh Downs was on the Today Show.
But with the amount of material you do in a week, a 2-bit Seattle disc jockey could last for 5 years. And that's why it seems. And
Well, that's
2-bit disc jockeys burn themselves out 10 years.
Well,
Good for them.
Yeah, but you're talking the difference between a disc jockey and somebody with talent. I mean, why the hell do you parallel me with a 2-bit disc jockey?
No, what I'm saying is,
That's like going up to Sandy Koufax and say, you know, anybody threw like you in my little league, my God, you know. Don't put me in that bag, friend, just because I'm on the radio.
you know, we get one show a week, right?
Yeah.
It's played here. It would, you know.
Well, I'll send you all of them then.
We'll archive 5 of them and sell them to a guy in Texas. Do you have to feel that you're getting up for each night?
No, not at all. In fact, it's a funny thing. I love performing so much. See, I think most of you guys are not performers. See, a performer loves to perform. With you guys, it's a job. You keep thinking of, gee, you know, I've got to do this thing, and you have to work yourself to get into it. To me, that's the high point of my day. You don't think that in the middle of playing Hamlet, Laurence Olivier said, Jesus, I got to get out of this racket. What are you talking about? I'm a performer, man, and that's my life is this. The high point of my day is doing whatever I do.
You never come to a point where you think, I've got to go, you know, sit and listen to some Bach for a while.
Well, everybody does. So does Olivier. Yes, it does get you tired performing, but I don't get tired of performing. In other words, yes, when I do a show that's a tough, hard show, like when I do a 2-hour show on stage before 2,000 people at Princeton, for example, where I'm playing everything from a cockroach to the Hudson River, and I do. Yes, I'm tired, but I can hardly wait for the next one. See, I think you're continually confusing me with journeyman radio men. That's not at all what I do. I am a performer. I'm an actor. I use the medium as a dramatic medium.
What do you think of the Stanislavski system in the work?
I am in the actor's studio, and as a matter of fact, that's the way I work.
Do you believe in that whole recreation?
Yes, very much so.
What's the longest straight stint that you've done on radio? Wasn't it true at one time you did a 6-hour program once a week?
Yeah, but you see, 5.
That was on a weekend.
Weekend. It was from 9 to 1.
How did that grab you? I mean, was that?
I enjoyed it, but it was too much. See, I also think too, since I do deal in humor and satire and comedy, and I make people laugh, or I try to, that you can get too much of that. It would be the same thing as if you went to a stage show and say Mozart stayed on stage for 4.5, 5 hours. At a certain point, you'd begin to get a little. Now he may be still great, but you'd get a little tired. So the first opportunity that I had at that point to get out of that kind of thing, the best time for me on radio is actually about 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfect time. But that's roughly the length of an average good nightclub comic performance on stage. And of course, that 45 minutes, Craig, is very carefully choreographed. I mean, I really very carefully, the timing, the beginning, the middle, and the end, the beat and the tempo of that show is specifically done in that, for that time. I build up to a great climax about 4 minutes before the end of the 45 minutes. And then I build down slowly. There's a slight epilogue, and then I come back almost invariably with a kind of an additional stinger at the end. In other words, I work and at the station break time, that's almost like curtain time between the first act and the second act. I let people relax for a minute, get up and go to the John and stuff.
We don't do that.
Yeah, well, I know you don't.
Straight 45 minutes.
Well, see, I can't worry about you guys.
You never really answered
Would you rather
that
have us put
question
in time?
about when you got canned. Did you ever get canned by WOR?
No, I was. Yes, no. No, wait. In all fairness, see, I'm gonna. You really want an honest answer, and I'll give you an honest answer. I could give you an ideological answer and say, no, the pigs ripped me off and all that, which you'd love and your listeners would love. But the truth is that this came about. The station I had joined the station. I wasn't there very long. I had at that point, and I had this nighttime show, and I was doing something which was highly different. In fact, at that time, there was the whole New York scene was in ferment. In fact, some of my listeners included guys like KRAB and
You're talking about 56 now.
no, it's a little later than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's much later. So you keep trying to put me back in time again. No, it was the late 50s, about 58, roughly 59, and the station was going through at that time. Our station had the ratings were comparatively low in the New York City area. I'm talking about the whole station, and there was a decision made that the station was going to go rock. Now this was back in the days when very few stations did go rock. There was only one station on the air at that time that was rock, and it was WINS, Annalyn Freed and all that. So the manager was brought over from that station, the guy that was managing WINS. They were going to make it into rock. Mm-hmm. And the first thing they were going to do was to change the nighttime. My show was going to be the first thing, and I was on at night, so they told me, look, from now on, you're going to play nothing but music. Well, I'm not a disc jockey. So I said, that's ridiculous. And they said, well, either you do it tonight or it's all over. So I said, okay, we'll see. No. So I went down there that night, and instead of playing rock, I simply did what I did. And by 2:30 that morning, they simply reached over and they went back to the studio, and they played music. Well, of course, there was a fantastic uproar about that. That's what started the whole thing. It was a tremendous demonstration. Thousands of people poured into the streets. And they did. They literally did. That's the New York Times. It's the front page of the Post right now. I've got these front pages. And the station, huh? No, that particular one was saved. You know what that was saved for? For legal reasons, because they were then trying to sue me. So the station, it really hit the fan, and there was a big uproar. And they decided to pull in their horns. They decided, well, we'll wait now for a while before we change rock to rock till the furor dies over. But in the meantime, Lorenzo, there was a fantastic change of public attitude just in that short time, and suddenly WR went from about 5th to number 1 in the ratings, and now the whole concept of talk radio has been vindicated. But at the time that I was on, I was definitely a pioneer in that. The very few, nobody was really doing it. You know, the idea of talk radio is to have people call in. That's not talk radio. That's schlock radio. You know, giving your microphone over to some dildock for 20 minutes to yell. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or interviewing is called talk radio. It's not talk radio at all. But anyway, that's the story. I really was. And then, of course, the station advertised on the air for me to come back. They couldn't find me. I was up in Maine fishing. I'm sorry I went back now.
Do you, on your program, I know...
Really? You can let that go by? Why are you sorry you went back?
You know why I'm sorry I went back? Because when I left WR after that big first furor, I was given television offers. I was given offers to do a TV show out on the coast. I was given offers to... God, I had offers that were coming out of my ears. And if you're curious, you'll find this reported in Time magazine. But like a damn fool, I went back to WR. And ever since that time, my listeners have said, you can't do TV, you can't do... They wanted me to stay right there. In short, I find that the most limiting factor in an artist's career are his fans.
Yeah, particularly with your kind of a program.
Anything. I'm sure that Picasso fans want him to keep doing bulls in Spain. I mean, people, no matter what. I mean, F. Scott Fitzgerald had to continue writing stories about debutantes at Princeton. People want you to continue to do what they know you as. That Marlon Brando has never been able to live down Stanley Kowalski.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it well, you see.
You do.
I got another bit of apocrypha I want to throw in. Is it true that when you decide to write a book, what you do is you lock yourself in a room for a weekend with a stenographer and just
I wish it were that easy.
12 hours, and then that's what's printed.
I wish it were that easy. Wanda Hickey, which is on sale now, took me 3.5 years to write. Roughly 3.5. In God We Trust, I was working on In God We Trust with varying degrees of intensity 6 years. Now, I guess where that myth comes out is that where the work comes in, Lorenzo, is I work awfully hard to make my writing sound absolutely offhand. I try to make it sound as if it's a person talking to you, and that's a very difficult kind of writing. Because something happens to our head when we start to write. We automatically use language we don't use in our talk. And
right.
We use usage we don't use. I guess it comes from writing themes in school, Greg.
It becomes stiffer.
Yeah, very much so. I mean,
Well,
you
not
become
everyone
literary,
does, but a lot of people do, yeah.
capital L, you know. And my average short story, for example, Lorenzo, in Playboy, takes around 4 to 6 months for me to actually finish, to get it to the point where I want it, the way it is. That's the way it is.
This is probably the most difficult interview I've ever done, and I think the reason is that my original instinct was not to participate because since you're a monologuist, to interview a monologuist is almost impossible. I'm realizing because it's like I feel uncomfortable about interjecting my voice into your voice. Because of that technology that you've created.
May I make a personal statement here?
Sure. I like one of those beers.
You know that I must say that KRAB. No, a personal statement about what we're doing right here. We're sitting here around a table, Greg Palmer and all of us, and Lorenzo. And we're just having a bull session, and you know. The kind of radio that KRAB represents, I think, is a very important development. I think it's very. I even have to say that with caps on it. And as you know, my show's been on a station for how long now, Greg?
We started back in Jeremy wrote you, and I think it was late 1963 or early 1964.
That is correct, and
you sent it right out.
Right out, because in spite of I had a big hassle with the union about this. You may not know this.
You did?
Oh yeah. Well, because you don't simply take a show that's been produced for a commercial program. In other words, the station pays me a fee. I'm an independent producer, you know. I don't work for WOR. And I produced that radio show for WOR. In other words, I have contracted to provide a program called the Gene Shepard Show at this time of day, this length of time. Now, that involves a lot of things because New York is of course, I'm in AFTRA, I'm in Equity, and all these various unions. There are things like union scales and fees and one thing and another that have to be observed and so forth. And to give that product which you have produced and people have paid for, simply to say, well, I'll give it to them free, then, that causes problems. No, it really does. Not to the station was delighted. In fact, WOR is a very open station that way. They said, gee, great.
You set some kind of a precedent to the unions.
I did. In fact, I went to the union and I raised hell with them, and I said, I believe in this kind of thing, and I think if there's any real future in radio, it's in stations like KRAB. This is a real future. It's genuine, really great radio. So they made a decision. They said, well, if you want to do that, fine. But I had to do that first. You might not have known that, Greg. So then, when we began to send the shows out here, I don't think we've missed in all those years, really.
Not at all. And they're getting wide circulation. They go to KBOO, and then to KTAO, and then out to KDNA in St. Louis.
And they played 3 times a week now on KPFK.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, that's a real compliment, and I just say it's great. I love the idea.
But I don't like your I think your theory about the fatal future of radio is really sort of silly, because I remember we used to think that back in the late 50s, really, when radio was seriously threatened by that awful Friedman and by those idiots like Storr and Stortz and McClendon, who were really ruining radio in this country and elevating the prices of stations and really destroying radio.
Oh, I don't think radio. Where'd you get the idea?
But I think. Well, I mean, it's when you say the importance of this. I mean, radio is in this country is going through a stunning and good revolution.
I agree.
Right now.
I agree.
And it's really healthy.
But there's one thing though that you may not know, since you're working here in radio stations, which in a sense don't have the problems of let's say union problems like major stations have around the country. I guess I don't think that there are those ogres that the Storrs and that are going to ruin radio. What I do believe really is ultimately 2 things could really do us in. One is advancing automation of radio stations due to problems of union salaries and one thing and another in engineers, that ultimately a lot of radio stations are going to become actual machines. They're not even, we keep
Automated for music, you mean?
Well,
or
automatic.
replays of...
No, automated. In fact, they're so automated now, they're almost like an automated Omni in aviation. It's a machine, really, with an antenna that plays continuously a whole series of tapes that are programmed even by electronics from a place that may be 1,000 miles away, a central controller. And it just plays this stuff all over and over and over again, whatever the top 40 happens to be. And then there is a voice that comes on ever so often and gives the time, and that's done from 1,000 miles away, and that's on tape too. In other words, this is a machine, literally, that just operates and turns out
fills the air.
Electronic entertainment, and this is a distinct possibility.
Yeah, but those things came about largely because of the very greedy broadcasters who are making hundreds and thousands of dollars on their operation, and the unions, logically enough, to protect the people who are working at these places, saw that money coming in and wanted a piece of it. I've just finished reading The History of Broadcasting in the United States by Barno, who's out of Columbia University. And what's surprising to me is that the corruption of, what I call the corruption of broadcasting, occurred so early on, and it's just a continuing, festering.
Well, Lorenzo, though, maybe the difference between the academician, and I know Barno's work, and the practitioner is really interpretation of facts. That I have been working most of my adult life, and even before, in and around television, radio, and the theater, and I find that for every station that seems to be making this hundreds of thousands of dollars, there are many, many stations. In fact, most of the ones I've worked for have been not able to afford a new pencil sharpener. Now, this is a belief, though, that these ogres are sitting there and money is pouring in like mad. I remember stations that I've worked at, and these have been big cities, where when somebody would come in with a $4 commercial, people would dance in the streets. Now, Mr. Barno does not mention any of this stuff. And that's because Mr. Barno is sitting over at Columbia grinding out stuff that guys like you love. Now, if he ever came and wrote the truth about this thing, everybody'd be bugged. Now, I know at WOR, when I first came at WOR, it was amazing that a station, here's a station, do you know that WOR television in New York City has not made money in 7 consecutive years. They've lost money. Now, Mr. Barno doesn't relate that. I happen to know it's the truth.
Well, that's a funny type of economics, because you can, the accounting end of broadcasting is something I've learned an awful lot about in the last 10 years since I've lost a fortune on it, on radio. And what happens is that although you may be
Even it's happened to him, and he says it's not happening to the other ones. So go ahead.
well, I'm a wretched businessman.
It may be
That's my
paper
problem.
losses, huh?
Yeah, it's paper losses, and what
Oh, yeah,
happens is
sure.
that the worth of the license keeps going up.
Because I
So,
think that
But
paper
it would
losses.
I don't want to.
continue
I don't want
if
to.
they were really losing
Helen,
money.
the
The only
paper-
people that continue when they're losing money are people like KRAB.
Helen, that's not true. The paper losses, Helen. Let me say, I hold no brief for commercial broadcasters. I really don't. But if you say it's paper losses, after all, a radio station makes its money from the commercials. I've known some stations that have as many as 8 hours straight with no commercials. Yet engineers are sitting there running the boards, all of them getting $200 a week. Disc jockeys are in there running around playing their records. The electric light bill goes on, but there's no commercials. Where are they making this money? Where's it coming from? Well, I'll tell you where it's coming from. Many of them are losing their shirt. Now, why do they stay in business? Well, they're in business. It's like if you go out, you open up a grocery store, and you put all your money in the grocery store, and it's starting to lose money. You keep working at it. You keep trying to make the thing. That's why they keep trying different formats and that. But to think that these guys are sitting on top of a big money-making machine, I think what we're doing is we're confusing radio stations with networks. People tend to confuse a radio station that's operating in Covington, Kentucky, with NBC or CBS, and we read too many stories like George Washington Hill and Clark Gable playing the big radio man and all that.
We watch TV.
You watch TV. See, it's just like it's like the economics of sport. You keep thinking guys that own sports teams are making all kinds of dough. Well, it's fascinating. The one of the major league franchises in Chicago had a big celebration just a month ago. They made $106,000. Well, that was a celebration. That was because that was the first time they made money in 9 years.
Yeah, Seattle knows all about that.
Well, all right, but you don't hear Kurt Gowdy talk about that stuff. See, you only hear Kurt Flood saying he's oppressed because they only paid him $90,000. But you don't hear these guys. I mean, I knew one guy that owned a major league team used to walk around in tennis shoes, and that's a fact because he just didn't make any money on the damn thing, and he finally wound up by selling it. But the point, by the way, for roughly $250,000 less than he paid for it originally. So there's a great myth going on in this country that there are, and I'm sure that there in some industries many people are making a lot of money. But I happen to know something about radio, and I happen to know that a lot of radio stations put up a great front. My God, they've got neon signs, they've got big billboards. The Now, fantastic sound that's taken over Japip, Wisconsin, And the poor guys sitting there, they're eating hamburgers, they're frying over the hot plate that they've got and they're using the heat from the transmitting tubes to heat their water. And I'm serious. You really don't know anything about the economics of this racket.
I wonder how many famous, in quotes, broadcasters at some of these stations are living like a lot of people I know, like for the last 5 years, living entirely on blimpies.
That's right. As a matter of fact, Blimpies, that's a sandwich in New York.
Like a hero.
It's a hero sandwich.
Oh.
But in New York, it's really something. The economics. See, I think what we're ignoring here largely is the fact that in broadcasting, and it's a sad fact, particularly radio represents to the advertiser a marginal buy. In other words, if you're, let's just take Dr. Pepper here. We've got a Dr. Pepper bottle sitting here. Dr. Pepper's a big nationwide concern. They're going to go on an advertising campaign. All right. The first thing they will allot a large, let's say they have $10 million to spend. They will put $10 million of that 10 millions they will allot in the beginning of the year. They'll say, well, of course, television is where it is. Yeah. So they will put 8 of the 10 in television. Then they will say, all right, what's the next one? Well, print is very important to most of these guys. For many reasons, too complicated to go into here, but they will put then out of that $2 million, they will put $1,700,000 for a big color campaign in Life magazine, we'll say. Then there's billboards. Then they'll finally get way down at the end, and they'll say, well, we've got let's see, we've got $1.25 now. So some poor little guy down at the end of the hall down there says, what do you say we buy Big Fred's disc jockey show? Well, now, this is the actual way it works. Now, what about that dollar that they're going to spend? Well, in New York City alone, there are 63 radio outlets. 63. And I want to tell you, the competition is worse than Indiana 500. It's those 63 stations coming down there to make that sale remind me of the home stretch of the Indianapolis 500. But it's always believed by the people outside that, gee, do you know that
If you don't mind my asking,
Yeah.
Maybe if you do, tell me. What does a minute of time cost on the Gene Shepherd program? You're what, 14 percentage points ahead of everybody else?
That's right. Now, well, how much do you think? Here I am. I'm leading New York City. My show is
Advertisement?
14%. My show has a rating of 14% according to the most recent ARB rating we've just received, and it caused quite a stir in town. Well, because of other things involved. See, it really says that rock is dead. Rock is dead.
The second runner was our big.
See, the big rocker in town had always led.
The last word.
Now, for the first time, I not only nosed them up, but my show happens to be 14% higher than the next station. Now, that means I'm leading a pack of 63. How much do you think it costs to buy a spot on my show? And by the way, we cover 25 states.
Someplace between $100 and $500.
Well, I'll tell you, you can get a spot on my show for about $60.
Is that right?
Yeah.
How
The
long?
number one.
Lord.
That's a minute spot. That's right.
Do you have sponsors?
Now.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Well, now, wait a minute. Now, listen. Now, see, you're amazed, but you're missing my point here. What about the other 62?
Oh.
You see what I'm saying? The guys that
$1.25.
the guy that comes in, the guy that comes in with his ratings, and it turns out he's running 59th in a field of 63. You don't think for a minute that he's going to get anything for those spots if he sells it at all.
Yeah.
See, and here, the guy up at Columbia is writing all this pap about all these. Yeah, I'm telling you facts now.
Yeah, but I'm very surprised knowing what newspaper ads cost.
Well, a minute of time on Cabot show. I think a minute ad, or maybe it's a 30-second ad. I'm not sure which is between $5,000 and $7,000.
Yeah, and that's what we're used to hearing.
Yeah, but even that isn't much when you stop to
That's
think
not
of it.
much.
That's nationwide color television.
Yeah,
That's
Carson
probably
show
that's
is $7,000.
yeah.
You can buy a minute of
Stop
time.
and think about it for a minute.
You don't get Ed McMahon. You get
Yeah.
Dawes Butler, but you got a minute of time.
65.
I really like your innocence. You're all very innocent about it.
Here he comes. See,
Here we go.
Yeah, there
He's
he is.
opening
No
his
wonder
third
he's
beer
dressed
somewhere.
innocent. I wish I were as innocent as you are. I really wish. I've often said I wish I could honestly wear a button that says love, and believe I do. I mean, that's real innocence, and I just am not an apologist. I'm simply giving you facts. Now, whether you like them or not,
You eat, maybe.
There's a lot of things that go on in broadcasting that are not, that you read about in the trade magazines that are not publicized very much. And one of them is the buying and selling price of stations, which is phenomenal.
yeah. May I also
There's
say,
enormous capital gains
Yes.
involved in broadcasting.
yeah,
WOR right now,
quite right.
I would venture to say is worth between $12 and $15 million.
Yeah, but listen to what they've done, though. Now, I don't see any reason why they're not worth that. Because after all, it's taken them, and I've been at that station long enough to have seen it happen. These people have spent 10 years now, or better, working on a radio station to the point now where they can honestly say, we have the largest audience in the country. Now, that's the country. And it's only because we've worked on our radio station. Now, when they got that license, nobody gave them the audience. Nobody turned over a series of great shows. Nobody turned over the Gene Shepherds to them. They simply got a frequency. They built a radio station.
Yeah.
Well, now wait a minute. I'm telling you something you don't want to hear, Lorenzo. Damn it,
Right.
listen. And they turned around, and that station, I remember when that station could have been bought for about quite probably $800,000. But because they worked on that station, they built it up to this thing where it's like, sure, you can go over and buy the T-Neck Little League team for $50, but how long do you think it's taken them, say, to build the Pittsburgh Pirates to be world champion? Nobody talks about all those losing years.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about all those years when the damn station was subsidizing me and making nothing on my show, by the way. Not a damn cent. And yet they paid me every week, and they gave me the show to put on your station. And so ultimately, when they seem to have built it up to something, we resent the fact. We don't recognize they've done anything. They haven't even sold it. Yours is a paper figure. They haven't sold that station. Well, to say that it's worth something, I can turn around and say, how much is your shirt worth? But you're not about to sell it. I mean, that's a very unfair thing to say.
Him in it or not?
Now, I will agree that we're talking about the station I'm on, but I will agree that many other stations, and I'm not holding a brief for radio, but to try to be a little honest and fair about it, for God's sakes, when you stop to realize what they've built in that town, I can't imagine anything more difficult than to be given the job of a station that's running, say, 6th in a city like New York City, where you're competing, by the way. One station in town is owned by NBC. They've got all the talent in the world they could put on their local station to load you up. The next station is owned by CBS. These are the two major opposition stations owned, and they're the parent. They're not an O&O. They're the parent station of CBS. This is where Johnny Carson broadcasts from. To realize that this station, which is an independent, they don't have any network, anything behind them, has built such a good station that they have topped these major outlets in every compartment. That's a hell of an achievement. Now, I know that probably a lot of guys are getting bugged at hearing this because you're not used to hearing some of the facts that are in the broadcasting industry. People make these sweeping charges, but boy, I'll tell you, I know many a station, big stations that couldn't afford. I remember one time in Cincinnati, I was at a station that was owned by Crosley at the time. And you know what the big issue was there? They could not afford, now get this, to buy a set of LP heads for the turntable. That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes, it sure does.
Now, I was there involved in all this discussion. There was a great deal of hassling going on, and everybody, they finally said, well, we've got to get them. And so, you know how they got them? You curious? They went off the air 2 hours earlier. They saved some money that way, so they could go out and buy.
They saved on the electric bill?
No, they were paying salaries.
There are stations that actually pay people to do programs.
Right.
Foolish.
No, I'm not talking about 50-watt stations, Helen. That happened to be a 5,000-watter. Well, I don't know how we got off on this subject, but it's interesting.
Yeah, now everybody's mad.
Everybody's mad. I've lost the whole audience.
Oh, the party. As long as we're in the midst of this program, the party, such as it is tonight at 8 o'clock at Earth Station 7, which is 1 block north of Group Health Hospital on 15th.
And you better come.
That's sort of up on the ridge over Capitol Hill.
There have been 2 questions that people have asked. First, they want to know whether there's going to be an admission charge.
There is no admission charge.
And secondly, they want to know if there's going to be booze.
In that is the kind of phrase which cannot be used in advertising any kind of event.
Lorenzo.
The answer is no. There will be adult beverages served.
There will be adult beverages served.
The cost of those adult beverages will go to benefit this radio station,
There's no
which is
admission
KRAB in
charge.
Seattle. There you have an ID, 20 minutes after.
Hey, Lorenzo, are you going to bring your hat to the party tonight?
The hat?
Yes, the cap.
Great.
I wear it everywhere I go.
Very good. He's got a
And
great...
Jake's going to play his juice harp.
I'll bring my Jews harp.
Are you going to play knock? Are you going to knock on your head? That's
I don't do that a cappella.
How did you get into the head thumping?
that. Bert, you've done that a couple of times.
You've discovered something, haven't you?
No, well, I was going to try and...
Not easy,
no,
is it?
I'm not going to do it, no.
It'll shatter your brain.
You know, find as the years go on, your head gets a little lower level, or are you pretty well
It
the
gets-
same key?
Good question, Greg. A well-kept head And by the way, I never sleep without my head protected. I have a beret which is soaked in neatsfoot oil, which keeps it pliable, and a good, well-tempered head, actually like a Stradivari, improves with time.
You feel the head is equally important as the knuckles, or in fact more?
No, it's the head. One never talks about a Stradivari bow.
No.
It is the violin that
Is
produces
it possible for someone else's knuckles to be applied to a Stradivari head?
No, the head is a total instrument that's like trying to put a Sears Roebuck bridge on a Stradivari. Doesn't work. But I have been a consistent head thumper since about the age of 5.
That's what the next question I was going to ask you was, what did you discover? Was it just as a kid you did it accidentally, and
No,
what happened?
one doesn't do this accidentally. I mean,
Do it accidentally, uncoordinated, right?
that's like asking Mozart, how come you wrote that sextet at 5? I mean, it was in the air. It was a thing that he did, and it wasn't an accident at all. Great men are always drawn
What
to
did the noise sound like inside?
hellish.
Why did you continue then?
I don't know. There's a certain satisfaction. It's like weightlifters. I mean, why does a weightlifter keep lifting up those things? He gets nowhere with it. He carries the weights no place, and it's painful. Sisyphus. That's right. It was there. I mean, Everest is there. We're going to climb it.
And the head was there, and you were going to thump it.
I was going to play it, and and I've never regretted it. I've never changed back. Well, then I run into local 802 problems. I mean, I have played my sousaphone in public at times. I used to play it on my television show, by the way, when I was in Cincinnati. In fact, I had a double B-flat sousaphone, and we did not have a studio orchestra on my show. And so, since there is a demand for studio orchestras, even though Johnny Carson never uses his, I would rush over and sit at my sousaphone, and I would play Funiculi Funicula. And I had a cymbal player with me. By the way, all non-union musicians, the guys that couldn't get in the union. I had a ukulele player, a cymbal player, a guy that played the triangle, and I had a guy that played a concertina. And I would play musical interludes on my sousaphone.
Well, I'm happy about one thing. You did not bring your nose to the piano.
Look at the nose flute. We're accused
The most
of playing
revolting
nose
looking instrument
flutes
you
all
ever
the
saw.
time, but
I
I've
played
never
the
really
nose flute.
seen one.
I should have brought it.
I'm glad you didn't.
You don't have to,
It's an
you don't
obscene
have to be-
instrument.
Yes.
You don't have to be a member of the Musicians Union
Horrible.
to play a Jews harp on the
No.
The Musicians Union does not recognize the Jews harp as a musical instrument.
No, not at all. Well, with some justification. I mean,
Or kazoo.
well, no, not really. I see all these various instruments are the native instruments of Indiana that I come from. I've never played the spoons much. That's from southern Indiana.
Ted Mack.
That's from southern
Oh,
Indiana.
yes, my dad used to play the spoon,
That's bucolic.
and he was from the South.
Well, that's it, southern Indiana. So we never ran into that thing. Of course, our area was very heavily influenced by Gene Autry, and there was a strong Gene Autry, Delmore Twins, Cowboy Copas influence in my area.
Oh, the famous Delmore thing.
Well, see, I come out of country music. This may interest you, Lorenzo. You can add to the apocrypha that my first real professional work was done as a C&W, singer and MC and performer, with an outfit called Chuck Acree and his Colorado Cowhands.
That's a good group. Huh?
It was a damn great group. In fact, I can even still do it. You want me to do it?
Yeah. we certainly do.
Well, we used to broadcast from a place called the Riptide, and I'm not kidding. It came from the Riptide in Calumet City, and
That city, which state?
Calumet City, Illinois, right outside of Hammond, Indiana.
They have riptide.
Oh, listen, that's the toughest town in the country. They had a place called the Riptide. There was a place down the street called Smokey Joe's Dollhouse.
You ever heard of a place in El Monte, California called the Bucket of Blood?
I never heard of El Monte, California.
We've asked everyone in about the last year if they'd ever been to the Bucket of Blood in El Monte. And Frank Zappa was the last. He'd never heard of it either. Said he
No.
also would never go there if he had.
Certainly would not. I'd stay out of that place right away. Sounds like a place that's a boutique, probably. And if it really was the Bucket of Blood, I may go there. But actually, the name Bucket of Blood, if you're curious, comes out of the Al Capone days. There is there was a place, a very famous place, that was one of the Capone leading brothels. It was in a town called Burnham, Illinois.
And it was called the Bucket
The
of Blood?
Bucket of Blood. It was a famous, infamous place.
Hot and cold running.
A mean place, I'll tell you the truth. Well, it was a bar, everything, and that's where there was a guy named Diamond Jack McGurn who was a machine gun in the bar of the Bucket of Blood. I'm filled with this kind of bad information.
You were at the. We were talking about the Riptide, country western.
Don't for a minute think that this was contemporary to me. However, I might point out that I am a student. I am a student of Chicagoiana, and Ben Heck wrote a lot about the Bucket of Blood. Yeah, it was a famous joint. Well, actually, I started as a C&W performer, and I can remember standing back at a bar at the Riptide, and I was like the MC, and I was the singer, and I played the string bass. And Chuck Acree standing over at the other side there, say, wait, and we all wore these cowboy suits. Well, why not? We're the Colorado Cowhands. What do you expect us to do? Go there in Robert Hall suits? They were Robert Hall cowboy suits, I'll admit. But you see, and all these Kentucky hillbillies are sitting in this joint, working the steel mills there. And so we'd get the cue, and the engineer would sit down there. He's sitting back at the bar, and he had a little light on this battery operated Collins portable we had there, and he'd hear the cue. The guy up in the studio give the cue, see, and we'd hit two big chords on the guitar, blung, blung, and then I would start clapping, and see, the whole bar would start applauding, and I'd say, and now it's time for the Colorado Jamboree, sent to you by Purina Chick Chow. In that big old checkerboard bag, if you've got chicks out there that ain't laying, Purina Chick Special Laying Chow. And now let's go, Chuck Acree and the Colorado Cowhands, let's get underway, the steel guitar rag. And then we'd start playing the steel guitar rag. And so any of you guys think you're authentic, Dad, you're talking. So, and that one day in the middle of my Purina Chick Chow commercial, what came in the middle there, a guy walked in and just walked up to a guy at the bar, stuck a knife in his back, and walked out. That's the truth.
You were afraid he thought
No, we never missed a beat. We just kept right on singing and playing. Because you never said, "My God, he's killed him." Not in Calumet City, you didn't. They just dragged him back to the kitchen. We never heard anything about it. So, you're hearing about really basic radio. So that's how the saga began. I realized I was in an interesting business. Yep.
You've got to get yourself a pair of those white cowboy boots with the sparkling.
I had a pair, honey. I
Diamonds in the heels?
No, I had a kind.
That's the most beautiful thing I ever saw. It's just wow.
Well, Lee, you know what I used to wear on the show? In fact, my mother still got them back home in Hammond. I used to wear a pair of calfskin boots with purple hearts on them.
Oh yeah.
They had these purple hand embossed hearts on them.
There's a
Porter Wagner has the most obscene costume I've ever seen, with the huge neon wheels on the back.
Oh yeah, well.
That's kind of nice.
Porter Wagner.
You got to appreciate this.
The one who dresses, and I mean, I saw him at a concert about 6 months ago, and he was just beautiful. Del Reed. He has got to be. I mean, that man is unbelievable. First of all, he's about that thin. And the big shoulders, the whole thing. Black hair, white streaks on the side. He had on a white cowboy suit, silver tie, white cowboy boots with diamonds in the heels, sparkly stuff on the sides. He just looks so great. I mean,
hey, Lee, you know what the reaction to that, you see, if one of the Delmore twins would see him walk in, see, Buddy Delmore would say, "My God, you smell pretty." And that's that's putting him down. See, that means he's light-footed.
Yeah, but he's beautiful. I mean, he just looks real good.
I know.
I went down to a country western concert in Seattle about 2 years ago and interviewed Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
And
I used to
he was using Milton Katims, the director of the Seattle Symphony, using his dressing room. And I was looking for Lewis, and I'm walking by, and I look in the door, and here's a closet. And up above it has 2 stars and says, Milton Katims. And in the closet is a sequin suit with wagon wheels and steers on it. Now, Katims conducted Seattle Symphony someday.
It's kind of fun, you know. But you know, may I say, Greg, since all your, of course it's part of it, and it's all part of the show. You wouldn't expect Charlie Chaplin to come out and dress in a gray flannel suit, you know.
I mean, every time Conway Twitty gets a new coat, everybody says, "Oh no, isn't that beautiful?"
And they review it, by the way. They review it in the National Music Weekly. They review his new coat.
Great, that's snakes embroidered on the pockets. I really like that one. You know.
But you know, some of the commercials were really great. If you want to hear, you know, you guys are living in very civilized. Well, you don't know that, of course, part of the show we did was sponsored by Purina Chick Chow, and we used to have participating sponsors. Now I'm dropping into my accent there, you know. We used to have participating sponsors. So I'd say, of course, first half of our show was sent to you by Purina Chick Chow, and I want all you guys down there to give them Purina Chick special layers. Let's hear a hand for them special layers. And then they'd all applaud, say the Purina. Then I'd say, all right, folks, and one of our special participating sponsors. And I want to be serious here for a moment. Do you have a loved one lying out there tonight in an unmarked grave in the rain? The Rockville Monument Corporation of Peoria, Illinois, now makes available by mail a genuine simulated Italian marble monument in classic cut and design that's only $4.95 a month for a total of 9 months. Comes with interchangeable letters and beautiful intertwined pious hearts in. You're killing my commercial here. You just blew it. Then I'd say, write for our beautiful illustrated catalog to the Rockville Monument Corporation of Peoria, Illinois. Put your name and address, and a beautiful catalog in 4 colors will be sent to you with no obligation. Now, I'd like to say this, folks. All them Peoria Rockland monuments are sent to you with an absolute satisfaction guaranteed. If you have used this monument for up to 10 days and have not had absolute satisfaction, your money will be returned without any questions. Now, Chuck Acree and the gang, we're going to do... Then there was another one. Listen to this one. You want to hear another one? I'd say the first half of our show was brought to you by Purina Chick Chow and Purina Special Lane Mash. Now let's hear it, boys. And then they'd give a cheer. I'd say, folks, now, one of our participating sponsors tonight, I'd like to be serious here for a moment. How many times have you gone fishing lately and have come back with an empty creel and an empty fishing line? While our friends and neighbors of yours have come home with a full string of catfish and big fat bass. Well, many of you do not know that gypsies wandering throughout northern Europe many centuries ago had to catch fish or die. So those gypsies invented a formula called Magic Gypsy Fish Bait Oil, and is now made available to you through the Magic Fish Bait Oil Corporation of Louisville, Kentucky. All you do is dip your worm into this can of Magic Fish Bait Oil, and you drop it into that water, and my God almighty, you're going to have bass and catfish. By the way, a little warning here that this is so powerful it is liable to be illegal in many states shortly, so get your order in now to the Magic Gypsy Fish Bait Oil Corporation of Louisville, Kentucky. Send your name and address to Worm, W-O-R-M, Worm. You want to hear another?
Would you do my favorite one?
Oh, yes. Then one of my favorite ones was this. I'd say, folks, we've been hearing about Purina Chick Chow tonight, but seriously now tonight, folks, it's hymn time, you know, in just a moment. And all of you, of course, who read The Southern Farmer, one of those wonderful publications that bring you all them canning hints, is now making available to subscribers a Last Supper linoleum tablecloth. Beautiful table cover. When you have your meals there, you'll be sitting right at the same table that our blessed Lord and Creator sits at. And all in lifelike figures and in beautiful 4 colors. You can look over at St. Peter and you can look at Judas and wonder how them evil things came about. Send your name and address to the Southern Farmer, and along with this, if you're one of the first 20 people to send in, we'll send you a knife-proof, bulletproof Bible that will come to you, that will save you from harm and deprivation in this time. Send your name and address to Christ, C-H-R-I-S-T, Christ, and care of this. Now let's go. Chuck Acree and the gang, let's go. Here's request time.
Oh.
I've had a checkered career, Lorenzo.
I like the one also that starts out, do you envy them friends and neighbors of yours who are driving down the street in them big Cadillacs and you can't save it?
Oh, you want to hear that one? All right. I'd say folks right here tonight in the Riptide, there's probably many of folks right here at the bar tonight who find it difficult to save money. Do you envy them friends and neighbors of yours who are driving around in new Cadillacs, who are wearing all them new suits because they know how to save money? Well, right now we are making available the Roy Aycock Magic Jukebox Bank, which will make it easy for you to save money. Every time you put a quarter in your Roy Aycock Magic, it lights up. Jukebox Bank. It'll play and sing to you, and it'll make saving money fun. By the end of the week, you'll have enough money maybe to buy yourself a new pair of shoes. So send your name and address to Bank, B-A-N-C. Now, folks, let's go. And by the way, we'll also send along, if you're one of the first to order, we'll genuine simulated cowhide Roy A-Cup wallet. With I'm sorry, Lorenzo.
We're obviously missing something, not having commercial.
You certainly are. My God, watch, we're going to get 400 requests here for monuments here. Because a lot of people got unmarked friends out there in their grave tonight in the rain.
I like the bulletproof knife.
Oh, yeah. You know what I used to say with that one? I'd say we have here, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very serious moment here. Mrs. T.F. of Mudville, Mississippi writes, my son Clem was saved from sure death in the trenches of Korea by your wonderful bulletproof Bible, which he carries over his heart. My God, thank you and bless you, Lord, tonight. Folks, that Bible, that's the truth, the bulletproof Bible. I always kind of like that. It'll really save you from harm. I like the fact that it'll save you from knife wounds.
Yes, knife.
Because that really counts on Vine Street in Covington, you know. Oh, Lorenzo, look what you started. Oh.
We don't want a beer.
Adult beverages?
I'll share.
Hey, listen, what's going to happen tonight at the party? I want to know, you know.
It's
It's
a lot of those blowing.
It's in a retired firehouse, which is now used for a lot of community things, including the country doctor medical service for people who can't afford real medical service. And I don't know what is going to happen.
It's just a party. There's nothing special.
We're just going to mill around and have fun.
Mill around.
So
Wait for the police to come.
what does a good party consist of with that, you know?
No around.
A
We
good
hope
party
that-
in Seattle consists of getting it out of the rain.
Maybe a fight or two.
Well, we might
We
arrange.
don't have fun.
No fights in Seattle?
No.
Everybody be wearing a peace button.
That's right.
So only be one or two fights.
Hey, you got any questions, Lorenzo, about anything you want to talk about radio? By the way, I love radio, as you can tell. And no matter what I do, if I go out and do, even when I was doing all those stage plays, the off Broadway and Broadway stuff in New York, I would not leave radio. I kept doing it.
I sometimes I figure that since most people figure that you're talking to them in a very personal way, there must be times when you get a very special type of groping that
True.
approaches you, and I'd really like to know what you've run into in that way.
Well, that's a.
Really groupings, though.
They're not. One of the curious ones, reaction is a continual reaction that I have. Whenever I go to a place to do a show, for example, I'll go out and like I was doing a series of shows. I used to broadcast from the Limelight in the Village, the nightclub down there, and I did live shows. They were on stage, people come in, and invariably after the show, Lorenzo, almost every week, somebody would come up, and I could always tell he had a kind of a hangdog look, and he was looking very suspiciously at all the others. And he'd come up. There's always a different type of guy, always different every week. A different man, different kid would come up, and they hit you on the arm and they say, "Hey, Shep," and I'd say, "Yeah." And he says right in here, he says, "Hey, Shep, who are all these phonies?
Oh.
Meaning, who are all these others? Yeah, who are these people who don't really understand you? It's just you and me, see. But actually, that's an authentic thing, and I don't put that down, Lorenzo, because I think when I am talking, when I am doing a radio show, it's really a performance that I don't talk to the microphone or to the listener. I talk to myself. I'm having a continuing conversation with the other half of me, which keeps laughing maniacally and saying, "Oh, what a crock of canal water." And then I keep saying, "No, you don't understand." It's really a schizoid thing. And so when somebody is listening in, and I have never yet gotten over that. All the years I've been on the air, all the shows I've done, I've never yet gotten over that curious little feeling of surprise that somebody actually is listening.
Is that right?
That's right.
Because it's your thing. This is your performing.
Well, it's
fulfills you
it's
doing
private
this.
to me.
Yeah.
I never think of it. I never think in terms of the audience. It's like if you're sitting in your room, your own room, someplace. Let's even say even more intimate than that. Let's say a bedroom somewhere, and you're doing something. Let's just say you, Helen, let's just make a hypothetical thing. You're sitting there and you're weaving the great mystic doily of all time.
Yeah.
You see, you've got this secret doily, this gigantic doily that has the history of the world woven into it, see. You're weaving away there, see, and you put it down, and now you go out, and you go to the A&P, and you're in the frozen food department, and somebody comes up and says, "Helen, my God, that doily is fantastic."
Yeah.
Somebody you never saw before, see? You say, "Well, really? You like it?" Yeah, the thing you did on the pyramids.
It frees up.
Well,
Back off.
well, that's what I do a lot. I mean, but the thing is, it's a very private thing. Yeah,
I know
Because
what
the
you're
listener's
talking
in your
about.
mind.
Because sometimes when I'm talking to a group of people, I mean just 3 or 4 people around the table like this, and I start saying things that really knock me out, and I'm still listening to myself, you know, I think. And I've known times when I'm telling a really tragic story and tears come to my eyes because of the way I'm using words.
You're applauding Lorenzo.
So great.
There's a little side of you that's sitting down in the pit somewhere on the stage there, and they'd say, "My God, he's a fantastic tragic performer." Oh, I've never heard anything like that. Yeah, it's part of performing, and you know, it's a funny thing as an actor. There's an old, and it's quite true. There's an old actor's axiom, and it has a lot of it even deals in a way with Pirandello, and it says that if you're ever on a stage and you start hearing yourself talk, you're in bad trouble.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? There's a different thing. It's being moved by your own words. Because other times, when I'm talking to friends, I get the giggles. Because what I'm saying tickles me so much. And I find I can't stop. And each new phrase that I say makes me giggle a little bit more.
Well, you're your own best audience.
I really am.
You'd be trouble on stage, yeah.
Well, you know, see, the other side of me is my own worst audience. See, the way I work is quite the opposite from you. The other side that's behind me all the time, listening to this stuff I do, is a total scoffer and an Ed Sullivan fan. Yeah, that's right. He never applauds what I do. He says, "Oh, come on, what the hell is that?" And I said, "No, it's well, you don't understand." So I'm quite the opposite of you, Lorenzo.
I don't know, I think that would be nice, though. I kind of enjoy that, if I could applaud myself. I would like that. Usually when I'm saying something, I'm so confused just trying to get out what I'm going to say and remember all the words and the punchline and not swear, that by the time I've said it, you know, it's like, if I haven't fumbled, totally made a fool of myself. If I'm home free, it's terrific. And I don't remember what I said 30 seconds later.
You know, Lorenzo, Leigh here has been with me 9 years now. She's produced all those radio shows and worked with them. Edited them. She's one of the best editors, incidentally, in New York City. She has a great reputation in that field. And she was one of the co-producers on our television show. And she had a fantastic job. She would precede us into these towns. Like she preceded us into the Arctic Circle all by herself, on the other side of the Arctic Circle.
Could get caught. Kotzebue.
that
Yeah.
she was in Nome and all these places before we came there. But to arrange for equipment and stuff, it's
I
just
really had a great time.
How did you arrange for equipment in?
Well, it's very different in
it's
very different in Alaska. Like I
Kotzebue.
got to
Kotzebue,
Juneau,
yeah.
and this sort of the whole crew is sort of New York, Boston sort of thing. And Gene and I don't know, maybe because we're more cynical or more realistic or something, we kept saying to Freddie, the director, and all, yeah, but Fred, you cannot just assume that Hertz is going to have two minivans. You really can't. Somebody ought to go up there and find out. And so, okay, I'm going to go up and find out. Because obviously we needed Gene to work on the artistic content of the show. And I got up there and I called Hertz in the Juneau airport and I said, I need a station wagon and I need two VW minivan sort of thing. And the girl laughed and she said, well, I've got a Chevy Coupe that you might be able to have a week from Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then I went and I kind of messed around town for a while. I went down to Red Dog Saloon, started talking to the bartender there, and had several beers, and said, gee, I'm really worried because I've got 6 people and 1,800 pounds of television equipment coming in tomorrow morning and I really need a truck. So he said, okay, go back to the hotel and I'll see what I can do. And I wasn't back in the hotel 5 minutes, his phone rings. He's this guy, and he said, my name is Casey White, and Ty told me that you meet me downstairs and we'll have beer and we'll talk about your problem. So I went downstairs, and it turns out that he is with the Juneau Fire Department, and he owns a Volkswagen van. And he said, Ty told me you needed a truck. I'd be happy to donate my van to you for the duration of your trip here. All I'd ask is that you fill it up with gas when you're through with it. And that's how I got it.
so she was working with people, very unofficial.
Great. You know, yeah.
She's a genius at that.
And we sort of,
Fantastic.
one thing about Gene never, when the show was first, they said, okay, you're going to do the show. Everybody instantly said, all right, now we're going to hire some researchers. And Gene said, I don't want you to hire any researchers because if you do, you're just going to have to fire them or use them as gaffers because I don't want to go up there anywhere with a whole lot of preconceived ideas about the Indian problem, the oil problem, or in the West, the, name it, the gopher problem. We want to go and look at it and see what's there, not what everybody has dug out of Life magazine that says is there because some guy from Princeton wrote a thing and like that. So we found out very early, the first trip to Colorado, that the best place to find out anything, forget the Chamber of Commerce, they're just going to take you to all the tourist attractions, which is okay and it's groovy and all, but we wanted to do something different. Was sort of talking to people on the street, or you go into a bar
In bars.
and you talk to somebody,
Just
or
a
you'd
guy.
be standing online in the West too. This works very well in the West. You'd be somewhere like standing online in the drugstore to buy cigarettes, and there'd be a lady behind you, and you'd say, gee, we really like it here. What's the thing that you really like the best about this town? And she'd say, oh, well, if you drive out to 23rd Street and you turn right, and you go up past the big pine tree, there's a giant cliff, and it's really pretty, and there's a whole bunch of horses up there that are sort of half wild. And we'd go.
Oh, so we
Chamber
never
of Commerce
all
is
of our
not going to
stuff was
send you out to
unofficial.
look at a bunch of half-wild horses at
So
the end of
that was
23rd
what she
Street.
did. They didn't know we were for
Everywhere we
television.
would, no, I would never come on and say, we're a big deal television crew.
Yeah.
No, we just sit there and drink, or stand there on the food line and talk to, ask directions. You ask directions to somebody, where's the, Dingbat's department store? And then you get talking.
Did you see the show?
Oh, like today in the market, when we asked, how do you get to a certain restaurant? And they said, that's a restaurant's a ripoff, you don't want to go there.
Yeah, right.
They didn't give us the
Yeah,
direction.
sure.
I won't mention their
But I have never found out anything valuable through official channels. Never once. It was always from the bartender or the guy at the gas station or the fella at the corner that helped you pick up all the junk you dropped in the street when the strap on your pocketbook broke. That kind of stuff. I loved it, though. Gee, I loved getting around and
What was the cost of producing that series?
oh, gee.
$325,000.
That's counting the camera,
Well,
which was bought
after all,
officially for
Was
the
it?
series. Yeah.
Break it down into one.
do you know how
Yeah.
little that is?
Yeah, I realize
really
that for television, that's just a drop in the bucket. It's true.
They bought the
Well, it
camera
isn't much
because
money.
the one thing that Gene wanted was not a sense of people sitting in their living room looking at a television show. They wanted a sense of people sitting in their living room looking almost into a window in this little box, which you can't get with film.
Yeah,
all of
That
it.
was taped, you know.
Yeah, all this is videotaped.
First one in the history of television that ever did that.
We're the only one that had the guts to take it out in the field, too, because it was really boom or bust with that camera. You can't take that camera to Kotzebue, and if the camera doesn't work, fly back, and then, you're going to come back with another one. It was only it. That was it. But it was worth it. Because I remember the day they had some of the footage from Maine that was shot at the Skowhegan State Fair, and they had it up on one of these great big monitors in the WGBH. And the sequence was pulling horses, these giant Belgians pulling. And the shot was a head-on shot where the guy really got into him pretty good, and they started hauling this giant stone boat, and they're lunging forward. And
Right at
everybody
the camera.
back from the
It
monitor.
was so realistic that the engineers stepped back from the monitor.
It had a kind of reaction that, they had to step away from the
Fantastic.
monitor or the horses are going to get them,
Yeah.
trample them. Oh, great. I loved it. You don't have that kind of thing in film.
Well, that's one of the reasons, Greg, why the show took. We spent something like of the $320 some odd $1,000 we had, we spent over $200,000 just to get that camera. We bought that camera. It was part of our budget. And of course now it's being used by GBH, but that's why we were so concerned when a lot of people didn't have color. It's funny about television, Helen, that most people in their own home would never think of having to listen to music. They would never think of having a 1948 Motorola record player. They all go for stereo. They have 5 or 6 speakers and all that stuff. And the same people will have a black and white television, not realizing that the color adds. Well, it's just a whole different dimension in television.
I think we personally are still anti-television.
Yeah, and you're missing a great
still hung
deal.
up on that.
So you're missing a great deal. That's a residual being anti. That happened to music. Did you know that? That the intellectuals are always against any technological improvement, almost invariably. This is an old story. They were against airplanes in the beginning, back in the early days.
Oh, I wasn't thinking of the technological improvement. I was thinking of the quality of what you see on television.
Well, they said that about but they said that about record players. Did you know that when Victrolas came in, there was a great movement against Victrolas among the intellectuals because jazz was played on them. And Al Jolson records. They always thought of music in terms of the New York Philharmonic. If it wasn't devoted exclusively to that, it was a bad medium.
Radio for years.
Radio was put
played,
down by the
you
intellectual
played,
spirit.
recorded music on radio. You had a nickel and dime station. It wasn't worth listening to. You had a live studio band, or you didn't have music.
See, the thing I'm trying to say here, Helen, is that all the mediums, no matter what they are, whether it's record, whether it's radio, whether it's movies, whether it's even art that you hang on the wall, paintings, you have good and bad. You really, literally have good and bad. If you decided that you didn't want stereo, for example, because people turn out Lawrence Welk records, there's a lot of Lawrence Welk records around, you would also be missing a lot of damn good Berlioz and a lot of other stuff. So in the case of television, I'll tell you, if you haven't seen those National Geographic shows in color, you have really missed an extraordinary series of shows.
I like that Wild Kingdom thing.
Well, that's something else.
Yeah, but where else could you get to see Australia? I'm never probably going to ever go to Australia. The shows like that when they go places that I'll never be, the Galapagos Islands or something. It's great in color because you really have a feeling that you're looking at it.
Yeah, there's a great realism. In fact, a friend of mine who is a well-known independent cameraman, and he does, in fact, he's the co-producer of the movie Lord of the Flies. So he's got his qualifications. This guy did a big 4-hour documentary that was on NBC a couple of years ago on Africa.
ABC. It was ABC, wasn't it?
No, I think it was NBC, but it was an African show. It doesn't matter what network. It was an African show. And it was presented in 2 parts. Yeah. It was in color. Yeah,
I saw it in black and
probably.
white.
I don't know. But it was in. See, the unfortunate thing is the people who should have color television don't.
Well, certainly, because also color television is a status symbol.
Is it?
I don't think it is anymore. I think
No.
isn't this the first year that over 50% of people.
Well, you can get color TV for $250. What's status about that?
Somewhere.
See, again,
No, well, see, we've never even considered it.
see, the
For that
intellectual,
reason.
the intellectual, and I don't want to use
Because
the.
everybody's going to have a great.
I know, but see, what you're doing is cutting out.
TV portable, you
You're
know,
doing-
that they hide behind the couch.
But you know,
never turn it on.
Well, Helen, that's sad because you're out hipping yourself. See, you keep saying, well, it's what the others think. That
No, it isn't that. It's just that we have never felt about putting money into something like a color television set, just to have a color television set. You look at the listings that are offered, and it just isn't very important.
Well, then don't buy it. I agree with you, but you're missing a great deal. That's all.
I think there may be 25.
Just don't buy it, but you're going to be
30 hours
sorry.
a year
Compliments
when
to
a
you,
color television set is.
but the only time that my husband has ever said that, or I either, was on your food program. And Dick said,
Well, then you must
No,
like
we
to eat.
should
That's
have-
probably your problem. But the thing is,
we should have a color TV.
but you see, you're operating blind. You know, it's like that once you have a color television set. See, I did the same thing. I'm honestly telling you, I did the same thing. I had a whole thing going where, color TV. I always associated that with slobs sitting there watching football, and that I felt very, very warm inside of myself. Yeah, well, come on, and you're screwing up the issue here. That I felt very warm about that. I felt I'm proving to people that I'm above this kind of basic slob culture, you say. Well, I was converted one day, a very interesting conversion. I was in George Siegel's house, very fine actor. And George has an apartment on Central Park West, and George had a good color TV set. And, of course, I'm right away, color TV. Well, that particular evening, we watched a production. I was with George. A production, I don't recall it was. Anyway, Geraldine Page. It was a color production that was done. Mm-hmm. And it was fantastic in color. It suddenly hit me, I'm not proving anything to anybody. What I'm doing is missing out on a lot. And I think we tend to out-hip ourselves these days because we're so conscious of status, symbol, and all that stuff that we don't want to realize that a lot of people buy things merely because it is an improvement. It really makes a difference.
No, that's probably true.
And in the old days, I would say back in the see, I think many of us still we tend to fight enemies that really don't exist much longer. For at least 5 years, there's been practically every night of the week a spectacular documentary of some kind you can see on television, going all the way from the Cousteau things, through the geographic things, to the outdoor things that are on constantly on TV. You can always find a good, like the other night I watched a color film on television, which I had not seen. It was Cousteau's first film. You know, that underwater film he did? Well, Jacques Cousteau, the diver. Well, they had it on television the other night. Well, in black and white, I mean, if you look at an underwater film in black and white, that's ridiculous. It's nothing. It's nothing. What is it?
It's a sensual man,
Sure, I'm sensual.
Yeah.
And I like.
That's what you're saying all the time, is to feel and experience.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to offend your friends by buying a color TV set or going to a ball game. Because your friends are going to die, and you're going to die, and all of you have proven what, I mean,
you might have missed a hell of a good ball.
You might have had a hell of a lot of fun at that ball game, And I'm so tired of people. What I'm saying is, really let it all hang out once. Don't worry about status and symbol. I don't put anybody down anymore. I'm past that stage. I'm not going to put down a guy because he has a pink Cadillac. If he enjoys that in his life, that is his thing. But I'm not going to be sardonic and say, well, status symbol. No, he loves riding around in a pink Cadillac.
But I have to say this, that the color televisions that I've seen have very poor quality colors.
Now, you know what I'm going to say to you, Helen?
My mother has one, and I think it's stinks.
Helen, you know what I'm going to say?
No.
People mostly don't know how to adjust their color TV set. They don't know how to tune them.
I'm sure. I don't watch hers.
They don't know how to tune them. Your mother probably just turns it on and turns the knobs a little, that's it. Well, tuning a color TV set takes a little practice and skill. And if you get a good antenna up, color TV is so beautifully realistic, it's almost got a three-dimensional quality to it. And that's why going back to the very earliest things we said on the show here today, when we did our show on TV, I decided, well, look, I'm not going to worry about those people with their black and white sets. It's just going to be there have to come a time when the artist is going to have to say, look, they're just going to miss it. That's their problem. And I happen to think that that television has a lot of bad stuff on it. I don't have to look at that. It has a lot of good stuff on it. We don't want to ever give TV any credit. And I say, well, All right, don't buy it then if you prefer to not believe that, but I happen to know it's not true. In fact, one of the things I like to do with my color TV set, are we supposed to be off now?
Pretty soon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
We have John Cage on at 5.
Oh, John Cage. Did you know that John Cage... No, I'll tell you one thing you may be interested. John Cage was one of the very first men who called me at WOR when I first came on the air in New York City.
Is that right?
John Cage. And he called me up, and that... We talked a lot. He used to call me up then after that. He's one of my first listeners. And then he got the idea one night when we were talking on the phone of the thing that he did at Carnegie Hall with all the radios.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that came out of him listening to my show. We talked about it. That thing he did with all the conglomerate radios up on the stage and all that stuff. So if Cage is coming on now, congratulations. You know,
Okay.
he's a good man.
We've been talking since 3 with Gene Shepard, Leigh Brown, Helen Norton, Lorenzo Milam. This is KRAB in Seattle.
And come to the party tonight.
The party tonight at 8 at Earth Station 7, 405 15th East on Capitol Hill, 1 block north of Group Health Hospital. Gene Shepard's program is heard here every
By the way,
Monday
the
night.
party's free.
Free, yes.
Free.
All are invited. Gene Shepard's program is heard here every Monday night at 10 and repeated Tuesday morning at 11:30. This program has been brought to you by Purina Chick Chow.